There we go. So welcome everybody to the Los Angeles Blender Westside Users Group, and welcome to World Blender Meetup Day. This is the third annual World Blender Meetup Day that we've done, and every year it gets a little bit better. We have these wonderful user group meetings all around the globe, and it's really great that at least once a year we connect them all and everybody shares the great content that they're presenting in different countries and different continents, and we record it all for the posterity of Blender. Of course, it's all free and open, just like our favorite software. So we have a really great agenda for this meeting. So we're going to do a very quick what's new with Blender, and I'll even time myself on that. And then we're going to pass it over to Joel from Studio 229 for next generation of VR content in Blender. Then we're going to hand things over to Sean Kennedy, who's going to show us how to use VFX with Blender, particularly for television, I think. And then Lawson and Cassie are going to present on are going to present on Man in the High Castle, the interior shots. And then we'll pass things over to JT to talk about the Blender Filmic production color profile. And then just due to timing, we have another 30 minutes in the room when the Amsterdam group comes online. So we'll get to see a little bit of their session, and we may even socialize during that. So with that, I'm going to skip the what is Blender because I know most people in the room, and I think everybody uses it pretty extensively. In our bigger meetings here in LA, we get 25, 30 people, and there's generally one or two in the room that doesn't know what Blender is. But I will say that not only is it amazing software, but there's a really great community that goes around it. So the institute that develops it, all of the city groups that present it, the studios that use it, they're just really excellent people. And that's the reason I stay. So it's been 5 months and 3 weeks since our last meeting, which is a really long time in LA. It's a very long time. We normally have meetings about every 2 months or so, but due to various stuff, we have skipped a few months. So it's kind of hard to summarize what's new in Blender in 5 months and 3 weeks because there's a lot that changes. So I will say that we had a 2.78 has released since our last meeting. We had an A version, a B version, a C version, and now Blender 2.79 is pretty heavily in development. So it's going through the different stages of BCon now. BCon is currently scheduled for April 30th, so I suspect we'll probably see 2.79 show up sometime in May. Some of the features that are currently targeted include the Filmic Blender color profile, which we'll be hearing a little bit later on today about. And for cycles, there's a whole bunch of new features. So the shadow catcher that Sean Kennedy presented at our last meeting is targeted. The denoising features of cycles that David Andrade presented during our last meeting is being targeted, part one. We have some really great OpenCL speedups, particularly for AMD cards. The cycles micro displacement that's currently hidden behind the experimental feature in Blender is getting more attention. Hopefully it'll become non-experimental by the next version, but we'll see. We have open VDB rendering, so that's pretty exciting. Something that I'm really excited to hear about, and I think is getting presented on World Blender Meetup Day after our session, is the Viewport VR head-mounted display support. So the ability to throw on an HMD and actually step inside your viewport, walk around your model, do all that kind of stuff. That sounds really amazing. I can't wait to see it. Some new modifiers going in, Bezier tools, action management tools, and a slew of new add-ons, some of which are being announced for this version of Blender. So at the same time, there's a Blender 2.8 project going on. And again, Ton should probably be, if you were awake, he'd probably be online presenting on this, but there's a lot of new features going on, pretty radical set of new features. So Blender in general is being refactored in a number of ways. The whole underlying OpenGL system is being uplifted to a more modern version of those libraries. There's a massive amount of viewport changes, really a whole rethinking of the Blender viewport, which is really great. In the lower left here, you'll see a That is part of the Clay viewport view. That's part of that effort. We have like a reworking of the depth graph, which is the dependency system underpinning a lot of actions in Blender. There's a whole new rethink around the layers and the collection system. So gone are the small little layers that we have at the bottom of our viewport, and a far more robust system is being developed. Asset management is getting a big focus, and a lot of workflow improvements, including rethink of how to make Blender easier to use for first-time users. There's been a whole slew of great software that's been released since our last meeting. Some of the ones that I'd just like to call out here, Blender Render Controller. So I actually just discovered this when I was rendering some video for World Blender Meetup Day. This is an awesome little tool that just released. That what it does is, if you're a Blender VSE user, you may have noticed when you render, it only takes up maybe like 20% of your CPU, and it takes a very, very long time. Well, this is a very simple tool that just lets you open the blend. It figures out all the parameters just by reading the blend, and you hit render, and what it does is it'll use FFmpeg to chunk up the video, and it spawns up multiple instances of Blender depending on how many cores and threads you have. And it renders it at, like, on my CPU, 12 times the speed, right? It's incredible. So he's got some great videos here about the kind of differences in speed. So if you use the VSE, strongly recommend it. Also, there's been a bunch of commercial add-ons that have been updated. So the Grove release 4.a, which is a tree generator, really professional add-on. RenderMan, which of course we just heard about. Krita released on OS X, which was a pretty major milestone for them. AMD is releasing, Radeon Pro Render plugins for Blender. Some new resources. Blender Cloud has released all new training. So there's a Toon character training workshop training, which is what's shown down at the bottom of the screen, by the same guy that does Katsu Cats, which won a Suzanne Award this year. Of course, Blender Institute podcasts are awesome. They come out about every 2 weeks. Really great. The whole studio jumps on. There's mostly animators, but some developers. And you get an inside peek on the projects that they're working on. So, for example, Agent 327, as well as there's some commercial courses that have come out. So Space VFX is a notable one, and they've released a bunch of free modules for that. It's promotional. There's some movies that are being released, like, who is it that's Colin Levy has just kickstarted his own short film, which the VFX were done in Blender. It's a science fiction piece, which looks pretty neat. Okay, all the Blender Conference 2016 videos are online. There's also a new Blender Course Basics ebook for those that are new to Blender. There's always brand new ebooks you can point people to. Blender got selected this year for Google Summer of Code, which is really exciting. There's some great proposals for what's going into Google Summer of Code. If you want to go check out some of those, you could visit this page, which will come up shortly. So these are ideas for Google Summer of Code, and you can go down here and look at what's happening in motion tracking, cycles, painting, all sorts of different areas. And of course, World Blender Meetup Day, which is happening today. So I want to take this opportunity to welcome back Campbell Barton to the development team at Blender. Campbell's one of the most prolific Blender developers, and it was sad to see him go during our last meeting, and it's wonderful to see him come back during this meeting. So welcome back, Blender, or Campbell. Happy 23rd birthday to Blender, and happy 3rd birthday to the Blender Cloud. All right, and with that, I think we will, we have time. Any announcements from anyone? Anything else going on, or add-ons, or events, or books, or training? Nope. Oh, everybody's still waking up here in LA.